everybody? Welcome back. So, as I was kind of saying when we did the first intro chapter, or first intro show on this one, that I kind of look at the immune system being multiple layers of defense. What we're going to do on this one here is going to be a really short one, just going to take a look at the first line of defense against different pathogens. A lot of times these are referred to as barrier defenses. If you think about medieval castles, this would be like the castle wall, something like a moat, something that's always there, not really necessarily active defense whatsoever, but it's definitely something that makes it more difficult for something to get in. So some examples of this would be like intact skin, mucous membranes, and a few of the chemical defenses that we'll talk about in the body. Again, the most obvious ones on this is really the skin. If you think about the skin, we talked about it before, you have epithelium. It's closely packed cells to one another, really well connected, not space between them at all. Along with that being keratinized, which doesn't let bacteria or other stuff grow in there very well. This is a lot like a castle wall. No real openings in here. Generally, the only time you tend to get a skin infection is if you have a break in that skin. Another line of defense is, I always kind of joke around a lot more like the moat. That is those mucous membranes. So when you think about all the areas that are open to the outside of the body, almost all of them are going to have stratified squamous epithelium covered in mucus. So the opening of the oral cavity, the nasal cavity, other areas as well, these are going to be those mucous membranes. And again, mucus can trap stuff there, and a lot of times we have different ways to get rid of that mucus that does trap different things. Outside of that, we do have a number of antimicrobial defenses that are just present on things either in the skin or on the body. So things like lysozyme, it's found in, like it says there, tears, saliva, blood. This is an enzyme that actually breaks down peptidoglycan. If you don't know what peptidoglycan is and haven't taken micro yet, it is the part of the cell wall of bacteria. We do have other things that help generate oxygen species in the saliva, as well as different body tissues, which will help kill things off. That's one of the reasons, if you think about hydrogen peroxide, produces a lot of oxygen. A lot of times oxygen is toxic to a number of microorganisms. We also have some different enzymes like lactoferrin, found in saliva and other stuff like that, that sequesters iron from microorganisms so they can't grow as well. And we also have defensins. These are peptides that go into the microbial membranes and poke holes in them even. So those are some examples of, again, just substances that are always present on the skin, not that we're releasing it as anything active. And that's what I always kind of mean by these first line defenses. These are things that are just there. They're not there in response to anything, not like a fever in response to an infection, but just skin's always there. Same thing with these microbial substances. Another thing, a lot of times we talk about this as being, it's not technically part of the immune system at all, but you have a lot of normal microbes on you. So normal flora, normal microbiota, whatever you want to call it. These are things that a lot of times can out-compete and that are not dangerous to you, but live on you and in you. And when something in there that's a little bit more nasty gets in, these a lot of times can out-compete it. So competes for different binding sites, competes for nutrients, doesn't let these get a foothold. Probably the best example of normal microbiota doing this, the female with the vagina, they have lactobacillus as a bacteria that's in there. It creates an acidic pH that normally doesn't let yeast grow. A lot of times when a female has to take, for example, heavy-duty antibiotics or something, a lot of times they're at risk for a yeast infection. And again, that's because you knock down the normal microbes that are there, and other ones that maybe usually can't get a foothold are able to. Another thing I want to see, we talked a little bit about some of the stuff that's in the sweat, but we also, outside of like the lysozyme and some of the stuff like that, was already some of those chemical ones I talked about. We have a number of just kind of chemical areas that really limit microbes from getting into us. So, like I was already saying, lysozyme in a lot of the different body secretions. But on top of that, when you think about the sweat, we have a lot of salt in the sweat. A lot of microorganisms do not deal well with high salt content, and because of that, don't grow particularly well. So that high salt on the skin, the fact that we release some lactic acid on the skin, along with some other acids, gives our skin an acidic pH. And again, a lot of microorganisms don't deal well with that. If you think about the stomach, it has basically not a boiling, but a cauldron of hydrochloric acid in there that we protect the rest of our body from. But the purpose of that hydrochloric acid is really anything that you do ingest that makes it past some of your other defenses. This is going to kill off a vast majority of it. Things like cholera, the infectious dose is millions and millions of bacteria have to go into your stomach for you to actually get sick from it. Other things here, things in our digestive juices, the enzymes, bile, for example, that's released from the liver and into the intestines. All these things are also antimicrobial. Semen has antimicrobial substances. Like I said, the vagina already has acidic pH as the example of the normal microbiota. These are all things, again, not any of these are being made as an active defense against anything, but these are all barriers that are always present in the body. So again, part of those first line defenses. Really the last one here is just the fact that we are a particular species, we have particular genes, and because of that, our cells have particular receptors, other things like that, which means a lot of pathogens do have some specificity. As we're learning with like the COVID-19, it's specific to humans, came from probably a bat and went into humans. But for example, my dog laying over on the couch can't get it because they don't have the right genetics for this to be able to get into them. And really that is one of the things that we can see with this. The fact that we are a particular species means we're immune to certain diseases of other animals. The other thing is that even certain organisms based on your genetic background may have an easier or harder time establishing a foothold in you. So for example, malaria, if you're a carrier of sickle cell anemia, you are at a lower risk of actually getting malaria. If you actually have sickle cell anemia, it's not good. It used to be people would die before puberty usually on that. Nowadays people can survive with it a lot better, but again, those people that are just carriers of that gene have a decreased likelihood of actually getting malaria if they're in an area where malaria is present, which is also part of the reason that that gene that is not a healthy gene most of the time has stayed around in the pet population, is that being just a carrier of that gene actually confers some advantage, some genetic defense against microorganisms. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about this as we go through here, but when you think about what an immune system is doing for the body, it's really all about knowing what types of cells are in there, being able to recognize those that are foreign, and being able to tell those apart from self. And then really the purpose of the immune system then is to get rid of those organisms or cells, whatever you want to say, viruses, that are not us. So doing some surveillance, kind of like a camera system, recognizing who should be present, and then getting rid of those that should not be. When we think about what does a healthy immune system have to do, it's really these three things. If you don't do surveillance, you are not going to see foreign cells that shouldn't be in there. If you can't recognize foreign from self, number three, you might actually be attacking your own cells, and that's really, when you think about it, what autoimmune diseases are. It's things like rheumatoid arthritis, you're attacking the joints here. MS, your immune system is attacking nerve coatings. Those are all examples of autoimmune diseases. And again, kind of showing it here, the non-self one at the bottom, you can see that cell engulfs it, the white blood cell engulfs it and destroys it, where things that are self cells, we should not get a reaction. And again, when that does happen to self cells, that's when we are having an autoimmune issue. Just to remind everybody, a lot of these immune cells are going to be our different white blood cells. We talked about these on the last ones, but again, your neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, and monocytes. We've talked about what their jobs are. Again, these are going to be highly involved, being those immune cells that are recognizing foreign things and doing some of the jobs in terms of getting rid of them. Especially the lymphocytes we'll be coming back to and talking about in great detail in some of the later shows here. And again, showing you where they come from and how they differentiate. Not, again, a huge deal here. But again, we need to know that they can be in the bloodstream and make their way out. So again, that was that process of diapedesis. Well, first you have margination, where these cells roll along the side of the cell. They then take that exit, that diapedesis, and then will follow those cytokines to an injury or an area of infection where the immune system's calling them into. And this you can kind of see here. They kind of roll along the edge for a little bit. We'll do that diapedesis type of step here, and then are going to follow whatever particular agent to where they need to be. Actually, that's the opposite, sorry. They're going to be coming out of the bloodstream here, going towards whatever this gradient is of some type of cytokine and following that to the site of the infection. So next time what we'll do is we'll look at half of the second line defenses and then the second half of that, and then we'll get into specific immunity. See you next time.